the podcast that floats down here.
Hi, I'm Melissa, your Stephen King veteran.
Hi, I'm Ben, the Stephen King and horror film fanboy.
And hello, I'm Luke, your first-time Stephen King reader.
And hello and welcome back to the podcast that floats down here. We finished the book up on our last episode, so now we're discussing Stephen King's It, the 1990 miniseries, episode 1. This originally aired on ABC November 18th, 1990. It was written by Lawrence D. Cohen and Tommy Lee Wallace. It was directed by Tommy Lee Wallace. It started off with a budget of $12 million, and it had 30 million viewers in its premiere night. I will say this is the movie that got myself into this whole series when I was younger, and I absolutely loved it. And one reason why we started this podcast was because of what this miniseries did for myself. So anyway, we're going to kind of talk about, like I said, episode 1 tonight, which there's a little bit to break down. So we're going to start with the changes from the book that we caught on and noticed and everything. Luke, I'll let you kind of take the first note there.
Sure. One quick note, I did the quick research on the budget and the how many original viewers. That was combined for both part 1 and 2 for both episodes. So I couldn't find them split up. It's just over the 2 days that it aired, that was the, I guess, Nielsen rating number of viewers that they came up with of 30 million. So that covers both episodes. So I just wanted to clarify that for everyone.
Gotcha. No.
Yeah, there were a lot of changes, right? But overall, I mean, just as a general statement, I didn't think they changed too much. Like, it was my overall feel on first time ever watching it, reasonable on the changes, and we'll get into more of that later. But the first one that stood out to me is Urban Ben, grown-up Urban Ben, as opposed to out in Hemingford Home, Nebraska, just kind of doing his own thing with his private jet. He's like living in a skyscraper and with this, I don't know what you want to call her, but floozy something, I don't know. It just felt very different to me right off the bat from what I remember my first impression of Book Ben was.
Yeah, definitely. I kind of have a very similar note of they cut out Ricky Lee to give Ben a date, which I don't know if I'm a fan of that, because Ben was always kind of the outside loner of the group, just as a whole, just in the story. And the first instance we get of him is, he's this highfalutin playboy, architect. And it's like, I love John Ritter. Don't get me wrong. I love John Ritter. And John Ritter is a playboy. I'll give him that. But that's not Ben, So I don't know. It hit me kind of like after as much we dove into the book, it kind of, I was like, I don't know. Melissa, what's your first thought there?
Okay, first of all, I agree with all of those statements. Urban Playboy Ben is annoying, but I love John Ritter. So literally, I agree with everything you said. My first note was that they started with the murder of a little girl who wasn't even in the book. So we started with the murder of little Laurie Ann. It wasn't Georgie to start the story, or even Adrian Mellon. They completely cut out that. And I think that's really interesting because you have to remember this is like 1990, right? This is network television. There's a lot of control from the censor department. So there's no blood. There's no decapitation. It's 1990. There's not going to be any like LGBTQ representation. So the Adrian Mellon thing, that's right out. So it's interesting to me how they had to adjust some things in the story to make it more broadcast network approved. So like that's the kind of the thing that stuck out to me at first and really all the way through. But that's the first big one.
Yep. I think that's going to hold true on most of the notes that I've got like for big thoughts. But I very much agree with you on that. And I don't know. Like I think starting out with Georgie probably should have happened. I think to me, that was a big hook. Having Georgie in there right away and you fall in love with him, and then all of a sudden that's the character you lose. To me, that was really, really well done in chapter 1 of the book. And I think it's okay, I guess, because you have to kind of build up their relationship later on, but I felt like it was better in the book.
I feel like they also framed this story as this was a story about the adults and the kids were like just a backstory to it, as opposed to in the book where it was dual stories happening at the same time.
I could agree with that.
And you have to do all that in a total of 3 hours of television time. So, like, I don't hate moving Georgie to a flashback from Bill's phone call. I don't hate it. I mean, we literally had a slew of dead bodies all the way through it. Couldn't you come up with one that actually happened in the story? Or is that just me?
Not just you. Like, you had all these names. Use one. It's not going to hurt anything.
Right. It's fine.
Yeah. I had a second note, but I realized I double copied myself, so I don't know what my second note was. I'm trying to work through it. So, Luke, go ahead with your next change that took.
Sure. So it kind of goes along with Melissa's thought of a bit of the cleaning up of the story, and Bev's dad and Tom Rogan combined are gross, right? They're not good guys, but they are not really nearly as disgusting as they are in the book. I mean, it is really just okay. I don't mean to say just. It's not like what they're doing is okay or in the least bit not awful. Like they're still awful humans, but it is nowhere near as sexually driven or just disgusting and nasty like they are in the book. And I think it colors them a little bit differently to be more of a generic jerk that's just kind of mean. And yeah, they hit her, so that goes a different level, but at the same time, it doesn't have that same type of context of, okay, that's disgusting.
And let's think about like the level of abuse she took in the book, which was jarring, even reading that 20, 30 years ago. Whereas watching this on TV, in 1990, that's not any different than what you would see happen on like Dynasty or something. You know what I mean? Like that would happen on Dallas. So I don't think people would be as jarred by their behavior because that's represented. And is, I'm not going to say like widespread prevalent, but it's pretty well accepted that there are people like Tom and Bev's dad who exist in the world, but not to the level that King wrote them.
Yeah.
And that wasn't represented on TV.
Yeah, no, that definitely wasn't. And then also cutting out her friend Faye, leaving that whole storyline.
Oh, I forgot about that.
Leaving that out. And one notice that I kind of had, I'll kind of get into in a second, but what you were saying of, with Tom and everything like that, with the censors and just making it more family friendly, I guess is the easier way to say it. Like even Eddie's mother was way downplayed.
Oh, yeah.
Compared
and he wasn't even married.
Yeah, no Myra, no. That was my other note. Thank you. No Myra. Took him out. Ended up with a story that we learned later on in the next episode. But it's like I don't know. Like I didn't like that fact because he still. It just again rubbed me the wrong way. And again with Eddie with his mother. She being just a skinny waif of a woman kind of thing. Yeah, being that overweight size added to the persona of Eddie even being the wisp of a kid because he had that mind. At least in my head, it was like she ate all of his food. That's another reason he was so skinny and so small was she ended up usually eating all of his food. And I'm just projecting on that one. But it's just that those slight little changes. It's interesting to see that those choices made. So Melissa, what's your next thought?
So I'm going to go to like young Ben, who, by the way, young Ben is kind of one of my faves.
I thought he was pretty good.
Yeah.
Like hands down, young Ben. I could watch a whole movie starring that guy, right? Probably not now as an adult, but back then as a kid, he should have been in some sort of kid movie. I would have appreciated that. But his family life, that cousin is super annoying. In the book, it was just him and his mom. And then when she lost her job, then she moved in with her sister in Nebraska. That's where the family came in. So this was the time that I was watching it going, God, did these writers just like flip through the book and say, "Oh, lived with an aunt," and like assumed that it meant right then and missed the backstory. Like, that bothered me. It was unnecessary.
Yeah, no, I agree because like you had enough strife with Ben of the Henry Bowers attack and the love of Beverly, and we didn't even get the cut. Like you said, no blood from human. Like we did get blood. We got blood from like the photo album and everything in the bathroom,
Right.
but no blood from a human. So yeah, we didn't actually even get Ben getting his stomach carved,
No.
but it just had the threat of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll say like Ben's character as a child, it was like the way Melissa put it right there. Like, yeah, I did not like the living with the cousin and how awful it was, just kind of unneeded. But it seemed like the writers were looking at it as he has to have something that makes him push his mother away, and because she's quote unquote forcing him to live there in this bad situation. But it's totally different than what we get in the book, where she's seems to be a truly very caring mother, and it's just an overprotective, overfeeding type thing because that's what she thinks is right, and it's a little bit different than Mrs. Kasprak still, but I think she's truly a good-natured person. Here it's just kind of like, well, it's hard to show that, so that internal conflict, so we have to have something to make him run away and be frustrated, which when you were saying that, Melissa, it's kind of like, well, if this was, say, a 10 episode season, like just this first episode, if you split up just the kid stuff as a 10 episode or even like a 6 episode season of a show, and episode 2 was another 6 episode season, I think you could develop that stuff a little bit better. But that was one of those consolidated stories that one, how do you visually show that when you have probably 30 seconds to develop something? But I agree, it was annoying, but that's just because we know and love Ben's story as it is. But I could see it playing not the worst on someone who doesn't know that side.
No, great. And Melissa, to your point, the actor Brandon Crane, if you'd like to see more of him, you can go back and watch him as Doug Porter on The Wonder Years as Kevin.
Really?
Kevin's one of his best friends, not the other best friend from Paul. Yes, I knew. I'm like, I know he was in something else. Familiar. Yeah, I knew he was in something else, but this is his most famous role. But
I appreciate that. Thank you for checking.
Yeah, not a problem. All right, so our final thoughts on the changes. Luke, I'll go ahead and start with yours.
Sure, I just have a quick list of things, and I don't think I'm going to step on anyone's toes by just running through them. Lack reverting back to child selves, that really didn't happen much. There was a little bit with the stutter, but that was kind of it. There was nothing with like Richie's eyesight or the scars coming back. It was just, well, they never had scars because we'll get there, but that was just kind of it. Lack of Rodan, pretty light on Bill's death wish when he is trying to beat the devil to help Eddie. That's just, he leaves and comes back, and it's just this kind of awkward, hey, yeah, you're Ben and you're Eddie,
and I'm gonna ride a bike,
and Bill has a problem because someone killed his brother. It was a sweet little scene, but I felt like Bill's side of that was much more compelling. You just don't have that, balls to the wall, anything goes Bill. We just never have that, really. Yeah. Eddie Spaghetti as opposed to Ed's. I hate when you call me Eddie Spaghetti. That'll track through the whole story.
I also hate when they call him Eddie Spaghetti.
Yeah. No leper scene. It gets slightly changed later on for a different character, but we'll come back to that. Mm-hmm. Richie as a stand-up as opposed to the radio DJ. I think it's a kind of harmless thing, especially if you go.
I was okay with that.
Yeah, like 5 years from 1980 to 1990, stand-up comics maybe a little bit easier to show on TV. Maybe that's just all it is.
And also at the time, at like 90, stand-ups were really popping because like Seinfeld and like weird.
I will say one of my favorite lines. I want to make sure I'm not hurting anybody's favorite thing. Anybody? No. Okay. I will say one of my favorite lines was when Richie's talking to his producer or whatever guy, and he's like, "Who's going to sit behind the desk and on Carson?" He's like, "Get Leno to do it." Yeah. I was like, "Oh man, you could have had the job," but. It's all right.
Yeah, that's pretty
And
funny.
this was well before, like the whole. It was about 3 years before because Leno took over in '93.
Before you knew Leno was in the running for it because he was
True.
suffering.
Yeah.
So I just thought that was
That's
a
true.
nice nod.
Absolutely. And my only other final change from the book is a total lack of child orgy, right? I mean, that didn't happen. What? Come on.
Boo, network television.
No, please leave that out. That is why I put it that way, though. It's just kind of like, well, it was in the book. Why don't you just go ahead and show it?
It's the one. Anytime you bring up this book, that's one thing people mention. You know.
I literally never even think about it.
It's just so developmental for these characters. They needed it. What do you?
Right.
What? No.
Anyway, that is the one edit I will agree with. I'm going to run through my list. I too have a list.
Yeah.
And honestly, I don't really think we have anything different or anything the same. So Eddie in the gym showers don't shower with the other boy. That was weird. But the absence of the house on Nebold Street, that like the whole house was gone. None of that happened. There were no birds for Stan. Stan had nothing to do with birds. He pulled on his ear and was excited about, I don't know.
He quoted Boy Scouts.
Boy Scouts. That's what I'm going with. Yeah, he was a Boy Scout kid, but not really a bird watcher, which is a little like same general. You can see where they were going with that, but the weird light in the tunnel thing that sucked people in, Stan getting lost in the tunnels, that was a bunch of malarkey. And then the fact that there was no door with the weird mark on it, that they just like, and then like the earrings. Ooh, I stole my mother's silver earrings or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Sure.
there's a lot of what were we saying? Game of consolidation going on. You know, they kind of merged House and Nebold and the tunnels together. They, you know, streamlined a few things, and there's some that I'm like, okay, watching it because again, I watched this first before I knew anything else. I was okay with most of it. It made sense. Like they didn't expect you to know what they were doing and why they were doing it without explaining it. So I give them credit for that. Like they didn't say, oh, well, people have read the book, so they know what's going to happen. They know why we're doing this. They at least explained it. Now, it might not be the exact same way we know about it, but for an adaptation, it's not the worst. My last change that I noticed or that I liked actually was the reversal of the phone calls. Basically Bill being, because in the book wise it starts with Stan, we get his suicide first off foremost, then it goes all the way, works its way down to Bill. I like how it reverse starts with Bill, then we get the Georgie callback, you know, we get that part of the story, we get then it goes to Richie, I believe, then Ben, then Beverly, and then Eddie, and then actually goes to Mike, who, and then you're like, okay, and then like me knowing what was coming, like, okay, I know Stan's gonna be last. I like that they leave it for the oh shit moment of Stan's like, because they played up his whole time of I swear I'll be there, you know, or everybody's swearing, and he's being very hesitant, and at the very end, you walk in the bathtub, and he's just, bleh, you know, jaw open, you know, blood on the floor kind of thing, and we did get blood from a body because it showed it drip from his finger.
Yeah. They probably had to work really hard to get that in.
Oh, I'm sure.
On Stan real quick, young Stan, his hesitation every single time. It was a bit like, come on, man, quit being such a wet noodle. Like it was just like at one time just be okay with going along with it. It was just over hesitant, I think. Like for me, I always thought like after, because I tried to have a really open mind to looking at young Stan, and because I knew how sour you guys were on him, like, oh, I just never even cared. So I was like, I'm gonna focus on Stan, and and I just didn't get nearly as much of this wishy-washy bullshit that we got from it. I mean, nothing on the actor himself. I think there was a lot of direction choices that were questionable at minimum. Some rough acting, which I know we'll get to.
Yeah, I think Melissa put it best. Stan was there, you know, and that's about what you could, you know, call from him.
You brought it up to that. Good job, Stan.
So, all right, we're gonna move on to our next section of this, and we're gonna go with our big thoughts of the movie as a whole, like kind of stuff that hit you and everything. I'm gonna start with mine because I know this might be controversial. I kind of feel, apart from the tunnel stuff, they nailed the 1960s stuff for what they could get away with on TV. You know, for as best as they could get it on broadcast television. They got all the major plot points in. They let you know what was going on. Yeah, they changed, a few things like Eddie, the mummy, Ben didn't see a mummy. He saw a swamp thing or whatever. But you got the major plot points, and you felt for the kids themselves. There was only one of the children actors that I was not a fan of, and we'll get into that later. But
I loved all the children actors.
there,
We'll get there.
Eddie, we'll get there. But I think they did a great job with the story, like I said, with what they could work with. So that was my big takeaway. Was everything in the 1960s line of it on this episode at least was actually really well done.
I don't know if I'd go so far to give it a really on that, but I will say it was done decently. Like it was palatable, right? Like I could watch it. It was all right. That's how I felt about this section.
Yeah, overall, I'm gonna agree with you. I wouldn't say it was amazing, but it got the vibe that I was looking for. Like overall, it hit that kind of Goonies friendship type feel,
Yes.
which is what I always thought of it as. And I thought it made sense how they showed the kids meeting each other. It was obviously consolidated a little bit, and I thought they hit all of the main points, like you were saying, Benj. And we had almost all of the big scenes, right? Even if they were adjusted a little bit and maybe swapping out the characters, I feel like we got almost all of the really big scenes, besides my boy Eddie Corcoran. Get it?
And no Paul Bunyan.
And no Paul Bunyan.
And no House on Nebo Street Funhouse scene.
Well,
And the werewolf was moved to the basement of the school, which I was totally fine with.
right. And the mummy was moved to Nebold Street as opposed to the standpipe.
Yeah, but that's in the next part. That's in episode 2.
Okay.
Yeah. And Ben's dad was the clown. I don't know.
Yeah.
But like, I loved the picture.
Yep.
The
That was
clown
really well
picture,
done.
That was really well done with the hand coming out. I was sufficiently scared at the blood coming out of the bathroom. I thought they did a really good job of like Bill's mom picking up the bleeding photo album and like not noticing, and then that coming back again later with Beverly and her dad. Like they hit the right points, and I felt the right things.
I'd call it success. So I think we're with you overall, Benj.
Sure.
Yep.
Thank you. All right. So, Melissa, I'll go with your first overall.
So I was okay. I know we talked about this, but I was really okay with Georgie getting being moved to flashback for Bill, because I think it helped sort of set the stage of setting up the 1960s stuff chronologically, sort of. But I really liked that they got the kiss goodbye to Bill. I thought
neat
that.
boat.
Yep, I appreciated that. Felt right. Maybe the wrong spot, but the scene felt good.
Overall, yeah, I expected a lot out of that scene, and I think it's probably truer to the
That's
book.
because you're hashtag Team Georgie.
I
so-
am Team Georgie. I just have a thing for characters named George, apparently, especially if they have a twin. But
not the twin, just the George.
just the George. But I think what they did is probably truer to the way the book describes it than how I just remember, because that's the first exposure I have to the book, right? And so it's got a very special place in my heart. And Georgie was a lot more annoying in the movie than I remembered him being. Yeah. But like I reading back on it, like I can see there's absolutely that sense of it if you put it that way. But maybe that's coming from a younger brother's perspective, where like, no, like he's not being annoying. He's just curious and he wants to hang out with his big brother Bill. And it's just, I don't know, a little shove offy to me between them. But then it does get to that right point of the kiss and, be careful and all that. So
yeah, I will put my overall thing here too. Tim Curry is unmatched. Whenever I think of Tim Curry or talk about Tim Curry, he's Pennywise, and then he's Dr. Frankenfurter, then he's the guy from Home Alone 2, and then the guy from Clue. That's
now
order.
Hang on. You missed a very important one in there for me. Probably the most important, other than Pennywise. His narration of Lemony Snicket's series of unfortunate events is quite good.
It is.
It is super quite good.
This is my first. This was where I knew this before I even knew Rocky Horror Picture Show, and I think every scene he's in, he just kills it. I don't care if it's over the top. I don't care if it's
It should be. I'm with you. I'm with you.
So I just wanted to put that out there. So all right, on to the next one. And Luke, I'll start with yours.
Yeah, and we've definitely touched on this, but it really this applies to both episodes, but I think more so the first episode, where it really shies away from the nastier, more real stuff that the novel gets into, which I will say I would have been incredibly surprised just by the way. I know, like, on our Noobs episode, we talked about what our expectations were going into the book a lot and how the book just completely was way different than any of us thought. This is right on what I always thought it would be like, you know, and this, where it's really just more of a horror terror thing. And, like, that's fine. But the way the book jumps into sexism, racism, all these really nasty, nasty things that are real and are in the world. And it's just kind of like Stephen King showing his balls of, yeah, I'm going to write about this and you're not going to like it because you might see this every day, but you're afraid to talk about it, which I think is one of the big overall things of the story is turning the blind eye, right? The Derry town people choosing not to see and choosing to ignore. I think that's one of the major tenets of it. So I would have been very surprised if that was able to work in here. And they touch on it, right? There's racial slurs and there's...
Yeah, that was going to be a point I was going to bring up. Sorry, it's jarring because there is one racial slur used, and it's the worst one. And to know it was used on broadcast television, you know, primetime television for anybody, you know, it's like, wow. You know, I know they're trying to, it's an adaptation of the book, and it was well overused in the book and everything like that, but it's like still... they went for it, you know, and as much as, you know, I hate the term, hate the word, I give them credit for not shying away or at least getting it in there the one time because, hey, we're going to push the boundaries. Let's push it. But it was still jarring when I was like watching, like, oh shit, they actually said it.
It's a little kid saying it.
Yeah, exactly. You know, it was Henry. And I was like, oh, wow. Okay. So yeah, it was just, that was my next note I was going to bring up. So yeah, look, if you want to finish your thought in.
Yeah, no, that's it. I mean, I would have been very surprised if the movie or the miniseries did the things that the book did, right? I mean, Melissa said it best earlier. It's like they had to clean it up. It just would not be on broadcast television. Like, it just would not have been. Now it wouldn't be. You could maybe say it would be on a Showtime or one of the premium cable subscriptions, which sure, like that's fine, but people know what they're getting. And this is also before explicit ratings. I mean, this is before mature audience only, rating systems. So yeah, that was the biggest thing for me is it kind of loses the heart of the story for me. It hits all the right points, but it's missing that one crucial piece, I think.
No, I get that. All right, Melissa, you can go with what's your next big takeaway?
So I have to preface this by saying this man is literally one of my all-time favorite actors. My husband actually sat and watched the miniseries with me, and he was like, "Oh, that's your guy." Like, I know, right? Seth Green has been my favorite since before he was on Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I love Seth Green. I love him. I loved him on Buffy. I loved him in Austin Powers. I loved him in... let me think of what else he's done. The Italian Job. Loved him. I loved him on his 2-part hook on Grey's Anatomy on guy with carotid artery thing. Like
Robot Chicken.
Robot Chicken, yeah.
Howard the Duck. Bring it on. I love Seth Green. He is one of my all-time favorites. However, through no fault of his own other than just being old, he was too old to play one of the kids. He just, I know they thought, oh, he looks young for his age, which he does. But when you put him at the age of like 16 compared to kids who are actually 12 and 13.
Ben and Eddie were the ones that stood out to me most as looking quite young.
But they weren't, because I'm just looking this up now. I did look that up because you're right. He was 16. Jonathan Brandis was 15. Ben was 15. I didn't look at the other actors, but he was only a year older, at least than those two.
Youngest. He was like actually 12.
Yes, I do believe you're correct on that.
But it was just jarring because I know Seth Green's work so well, and he does always look young, and he's this teeny tiny guy, right? The fact that he was the tallest one out there, I'm like, that's how you know it's like miscast. And I get it because he's great, but it was distracting to me.
I will say,
having said that, go ahead.
I was just going to add to your comment. Right when he first shows up at the dam, right at the Barrens, his voice just sounds so low. Like when he jumps in, he's like, I forget what all he says, but he's like, "Oh, it's the River Nile," and he's like, it just sounds like that threw me off. But my thought is, for his confidence that comes through so well, I think that's where it makes it okay. Is because Richie has that, and I don't think too many child actors would be able to
Right.
do that naturally. So I'm glad that they went with the right actor for the job because he has that. And I thought it worked quite well everywhere else.
And like I said, he's amazing and I love him. Now, having said all of that, by far, the child actors were better than the adult actors. I enjoyed watching when the child actors were on screen, and almost without exception, I did not enjoy when the adult actors were on screen. And I am a big fan of a lot of those actors.
I can definitely agree with you on that, especially in this episode. Episode 2, the adults did a little better, but yeah, with this episode, with the small parts they were given. But my big thing with this, I'll just finish my note off. Jonathan Brandis, the one I'd mentioned of, I liked all the children actors except for Jonathan Brandis, because even by this point, they knew he was giving me a heartthrob. So, Luke, to your point of how there was no race against the devil, no, you can't have Jonathan Brandis ride down the street on a bike and going full speed. Oh, Bill Denbrough has a bad stutter. Jonathan Brandis goes, okay, and that's it. Maybe twice, and doesn't stutter the rest of the time because you can't make the heartthrob look like he has a stutter. And he overacts every single damn scene he's in, and it just is infuriating. I was never a fan of his, like, through any of his movies. And yeah,
you didn't like Ladybugs?
Come or
on.
What was the other one?
Sequest was his big TV show.
Yeah, that's right. Sequest.
I love Jonathan Brandis.
Oh, I hated him
had no
back
problem
then.
with
I
him
still
at
hate him
all.
today. You know,
You hate him
still hate his
today. He
acting
died in
today.
2003.
His
Yeah,
acting
he died
today.
young.
Yeah, he did. And I'm
was
sorry
very
for that.
young.
Maybe he
Poor
could
man.
become a good actor, but he wasn't here. And I will say that, and it still bothered me. He's worse than all the adult actors. Every other
No.
Yes.
No. No.
Absolutely. He's worse than
No.
all the adult
I'll
actors.
get there. I'll get there later, but no, he is
We'll
not as bad
judge in
as
the finale. We'll judge in the finale. My thought on the stuttering part, we only saw, a lot of the times, we only saw him in Confident Bill mode. So he didn't stutter all the time. They even worked that little line in there. I feel like a lot of the major lines that we got from him were non-stuttering Bill lines. A lot of the stuttering stuff we skipped. We didn't see them do more of the fun hangout stuff where he had that. I can justify why that only happened a couple times personally, because I also don't hate the guy. So
That's fair.
I can be subjective.
That's fair. I just, like I said,
object.
his story like he was telling the story and he started like 2 words of it. And if Bill was actually telling that story in the book, it would have taken 12 minutes to get through the audiobook of it.
But we didn't have 12 minutes.
I know.
TV.
I'm just saying. But the actor who played adult, Bill, made sure to work it in every once in a while.
Boy.
Yeah, John Boy made sure to work it in every once in a while. Richard Thomas.
Also, he was on Young and the Restless. He played Jack for a long time. Just throwing that out there.
All right,
true.
Luke, go ahead. Go ahead with your next thought there.
The bullies, the Henry Bowers of the world, the Belch Huggins, who's never really named other than he just burps a few times.
Yeah,
The Victor
weird.
Chris, who is also not really ever named, maybe mentioned once as they're running away at the apocalyptic rock fight.
Hold on. I'm sorry. Did you get a Belch or a Crab and Goyle feel with them that you couldn't really tell who was who?
I knew which one was which because the first thing Belch ever did in class was burp. So I was like, oh, there he is. Okay. It didn't matter which one was which because there were no distinguishing characteristics other than that.
They were
They were completely kind of useless in general and nowhere near as scary or intimidating. Just even visually, nowhere near as intimidating as even the kids in A Christmas Story. I mean, they're way too squirrely to be Henry Bowers, way too squirrely to be Belch Huggins. They're supposed to be big, massive jerk faces. And I just got, wow, they're just whiny little bitches.
Did anybody else expect them to start singing G Officer Krumke from West Side Story? That's what it looked like to me with the bullies, right? I'm gonna pretend to be a jet, but when you're a jet all the way.
Yeah.
That's how they looked, stereotypes.
Yeah, and the thing is, they were stereotyped for 50s bullies, not 1960 bullies. I know it's a slight difference, but in 1960, it wasn't as much of a greaser look. That was kind of
Gary's behind the times. Maine's behind the times.
Yeah, and that's one way I could kind of justify it, but that was one thing that stuck out to me. It's like it was very 50s heavy, but this was supposed to be 1960, and so like the Losers Club fit the 60 mold. But yeah, and no Patrick Cockstetter either.
Right. There were 2 randos that were in on the fight. That were not named either.
Yeah, I will tell you, when we were watching, Bob's like, "Oh look, he's got more gang."
Yeah. And that happened in the Rock. It was just like random other kid, but it was just like they just ran off, which was fine. You get the feeling that they weren't really a part of it and whatever. But
yeah. So all right, Melissa, go ahead with your last big thought here.
So my last big thought is racial slurs notwithstanding, which are inappropriate and should not be on live TV, and that was shocking when. But besides that, due to the TV censors back in 1990, it really felt like a Disney-fied version of a Stephen King book.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, is ABC.
I don't think they were owned by Disney back then.
Probably not, actually, yeah.
But like that was kind of my overall feel, was like, this is what would happen if Stephen King sold a novel to Disney. And you just, I hear Robin Williams in the background going, "Don't forget, it's Disney."
Yep.
Oh, right. Can't do that because it's network.
Pretty much.
Ugh.
I can't agree with you more.
Yeah. Or Sony, or was it, or Fox now, or whatever. one of the conglomerates that Disney owns. But yeah, no.
It's Disney or it's NBC. Pretty much everything falls into those two.
Yeah, exactly. All right, Luke, go ahead with your thought there. Your last one.
Yeah, I mean, there's plenty of other things to talk about, but I like how Mike's understanding of the town's history just shows up pretty well developed as a kid. Like, that was certainly a little bit of a change. We didn't get his father, which I thought was a bit of a loss because he seemed like a really great dude, right? Kind of raising Mike to see these things, and it just not there, which is fine. Again, a little bit of consolidation. It just shows up with Mike knowing about these massacres or odd accidents and catastrophes around Derry's history. So I was okay with that change, notwithstanding, missing out on his dad, another great character that we're just going to miss out on. So big fan of that.
Completely fair. So, all right, we're going to move into our favorite things for this episode. Melissa, go ahead. I'll let you start with your favorite thing. Because
Pennywise. Pennywise. We haven't even talked about Pennywise. Why? Because he was the best part of the movie. Pennywise made the movie. Literally, if I could just watch Tim Curry being that guy, that's fantastic television and movies in general. The rest of it's crap. But Pennywise is fantastic, specifically when we see Pennywise in the sewer talking to Georgie. When he says, "Oh, yes, they float. They all float." Like the way he moves his mouth, I could watch that on repeat. Just that 2 lines. And it was so good. And then it was surrounded by everything.
And then there was the rest of the movie.
And the rest of the story.
They should have just given him all $12 million.
Right.
Yes.
Well, the way the rest of the adult actors acted, they might have. No, but so I'll go to my favorite thing. I agree with Melissa. It's the sewer scene that it was the best part. But I'm gonna pick something else as a runner-up or an honorable mention. When the losers all came together after the rock fight. And then the photo album with Mike, showing them. Because, again, it's a Tim Curry scene where he's dancing through. And he's like, "I'll kill you all." And the hand jumps up. And you're like, oh, you don't expect that. Because I don't think that's a book thing. I could be incorrect.
It's a combination.
It's but that scene itself is its own, morph of different scenes.
I mean, the photograph thing happened, but there was a plastic cover that he couldn't get out of.
Yes. And it was very well done. And again, Tim Curry heavy, but then you have all the losers together. And even when they finally back off Henry and they go, "You have to deal with the 6 of us." And Mike stands up 7. And they go through the whole thing and they're like, "Well, we're the Losers Club. You want to join?" "Yeah, I do." And it's just, they knew, and he fit. And so it was just a well done scene.
Actors were so good.
They were, most of them. Luke, go ahead.
I will wholeheartedly agree with both of you that those are probably the 2 best things in here. There's some other honorable mentions, but I want to point out one of the most ridiculous things. Okay, you remember when Stan gets pulled back and in the tunnels, and it's Henry and Belch. They kind of pulled him off into another little side part of the sewer, and they're getting ready to, I'm gonna kill you first. And he's got his knife out, and Belch is hugging him, and then you see this, I guess it's the deadlights coming out of the pipe, and it's kind of glowing, and you see it coming through the pipe, and it just comes out. And Stan and Henry just kind of get away from it, and they're watching Belch. And Belch gets lifted up and pulled ass first into this pipe, and he gets folded in half. I was watching this with Glenn last night, and we both started laughing our asses off at that. It was one of the most, like, he's just blank faced, which is, I mean, he's taken, right? I mean, so he's what we see later on. The deadlights, they just kind of wash it clean. And it's just the fact that he gets pulled in butt first to the end of this pipe, and we just never see him again. It's so funny. I don't know if it's just me that was laughing so hard, but oh man, it was terrible.
I couldn't laugh. I was too dead inside by that point.
So I was watching it because, I mean, I've seen this 100 times, and so I knew that scene. And so knowing what actually happens now, or actually happens in the book wise, of him getting cut in half, or head split down the middle, kind of thing. It's like, okay, that's a fair compromise. Fold him in half, suck him in a tube. It kind of reminds me of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory,
Yes!
Our Willy Wonka, Gunter.
Man.
Kind of
I just couldn't believe it when that happened, because that was like clearly the most absolute ridiculous thing we had seen. Just like poorly, just the terrible grab. That was the first time we had seen anything that was that terrible.
Hold on. Like, here's the thing. When stuff like that happens, I picture there are grown ass adults sitting around the table going, "Oh man, we can't show the blood, and we can't show. What are we gonna do to show Belch getting taken? That's gonna be scary. You know what would be a good idea?"
This will be visually effective. Oh, I just couldn't believe it, because everything up to this point, a lot of Tim Curry ridiculousness, right? That was like the only thing that was really like off the wall.
That had the Swamp Thing zombie, kind of that piss poor CGI, but that was just animatronics. That wasn't that bad.
And like in general, that was all like Pennywise doing those things. It was like the first time another character was latched onto and something done to them. It was just so unexpected in a laugh your ass off kind of way. Sorry, Belch, you just laughed your ass off for the last time.
And then the deadlights come. They take Belch, and it comes out and just whitens Henry's hair, and Stan just fucks right off. I'm gone.
Yep.
Just fucks right off, and Henry just whitens Henry's hair, and that's it. Just no explanation to why.
Right. Or like it doesn't really get into Henry was being used by Pennywise much, but anyway, that was my favorite thing of this episode of the miniseries.
All right, we're gonna go into least favorite things now. I'm gonna start with mine. It's obvious, Jonathan Brandis. Just more and more like this is the most he's bugged me ever watching this film. Like, because I was trying to watch something, to come up with something I didn't like, and then all of a sudden I'm like, I really don't like that kid, and I don't like his acting, and everyone else fits their character. Jonathan Brandis is short. He's supposed to be bigger than everybody. He's supposed to have a stutter. Jonathan Brandis doesn't have a stutter, and he can't act a stutter. Jonathan Brandis is supposed to be, inspiring. He's not inspiring. He's whining. I'm done with it. Anyway, all right, Luke, what was your least favorite thing?
My least favorite thing, and again, there's kind of a list, but in general, the Bev staring after Bill for so long, like when she first sees him down in the Barrens, and then after those two and Ben kind of walk up to the street, and Ben walks across the street, and she thinks the poem was from him. It goes on a little too long, and it's a bit out of nowhere, and it's just kind of like, especially after watching episode 2, that basically went nowhere. Like, that was just completely useless at that point. I don't know. That's my least favorite thing amongst others. But That's one that watching it, I was like, what do they do? Like, why? And maybe that's hate for having Jonathan Brandis in there. Maybe that's we got to get the one girl to lust after him over much, which is in the book. I'm not saying that that's not, but the way it's done is quite ridiculous, I think.
Quite heavy-handed, yes.
Yeah.
I do agree with you. Melissa?
I have a tie.
Okay.
And the fact that I limited it to 2 is really saying something. I really dislike Audra a lot.
Mhm.
I like Audra. I just dislike her anger and her angst and her, oh, my husband. I just tuned her out.
I have
because
thoughts on her next episode too.
Okay. Well, I had to get the early Audra stuff in.
Mhm.
Because,
It's not good.
no, it's fake. Audra has been ruined for me.
It's so not good. It's downright bad.
Yes. But equally bad was adult Bev in general. And here's the thing. I like the actress. Loved her in Smallville. Really. Like, this is what I'm noticing. A lot of actors that I really like a lot. I'm thinking it's maybe not the actor. Maybe it's like writing or the direction or something, because all she did was whine, other than when she was talking to the Japanese investors. That version
was
of her
good.
I liked. But let's talk about the fight with Tom, where she missed multiple times. Beverly doesn't miss. And like, she's right? Like 10 for 10 on the slingshot. And yet she missed him as she's chucking stuff. And just in general, both of those women, I think it's the character maybe more than the actress. I didn't like the way they were played. And maybe it's too much like being directed to be the helpless female and the whiny wife and the clingy this and the, I don't know, but I don't think women were represented very well, particularly using those two as an example.
Completely agree.
Yeah, absolutely agree.
Like I said, I'll drop a teaser that I have more problems with Audra next time that will harken back to some of this. So
I have a lot more problems.
Yeah, we have problems, folks.
And with that, then make sure to join us in 2 weeks when we're covering the miniseries episode 2. Find us on socials at Floats Down Here on Twitter and all the others. Send us a digital balloon at floatsdownhere@gmail.com. Make sure you check us out at thepodcastthat.com. Subscribe and rate us on iTunes.
This show and all of our shows at thepodcastthat.com are produced with the love and support of our wonderful Imaginary Legion patrons. Not a patron yet? Find out more at patreon.com/stayimaginary.
And since I did it before, I'm doing it again. Join us in 2 weeks for when we cover the second episode of the miniseries from 1990. You'll float too.
Stay imaginary.
Thanks.